Good afternoon. I am going to attempt one more question. It's the last one in our queue, so I think we're caught up after this. I've been putting it off because I don't know all the answers yet. And I don't know that I fully understand the question. And because of the anonymous way we've set this up, I can't follow up and say, tell me more what you meant about this. So let's give it a shot. Please detail the timeline of steps, including eras, of the capital campaign, specifically the discernment process described in the last two paragraphs of the Future of the Church on St. Charles Avenue section of the Feasibility Study. Okay. When you ask about what are the steps of the capital campaign, I believe that is what I'm going to be sharing next week. Meeting with Bridget Fiddler and Gianfranco Grande from Partners for Sacred Places. They're our liaisons for consulting on the capital campaign, and we have a meeting scheduled for Monday. So when it comes to the steps of what's about to happen, I'll share that soon. I don't know what you mean by including eras. Please detail the timeline of steps, including eras of the capital campaign. Maybe that's referencing, though, how far back are we going here? There have been lots of conversations, many that precede me. I've only been here for 8 years. You all have been having conversations around this building, I know, for the past 20 years, because I've heard from previous pastors, and I know that there have been conversations, formal and informal, over the past 2 decades. What are we going to do with this building? How do we care for the building? How do we afford to keep the building maintained? A lot of deferred maintenance has gone on that brought up some questions around, should we sell the building? Are we considering selling the building? Did some group go off and try to sell the building? So some rumors, some miscommunication, sometimes some misinterpretation, but lots of different conversations have happened for a long time. Leading up to Partners for Sacred Places and the National Fund for Sacred Places, I would send you back to the earlier videos I did that explain their process. We already had a document on hand from Cypress Building Conservation. I believe it's from 2016. I would have to pull it out to check the dates, where they went through the sanctuary building, the 1925 building, the most historic, and itemized issues that needed to be tended to, and then ranked them red, yellow, and green. Green being, this is looking okay, you can ignore it for a while. Yellow being, you really want to get to this, and then the red, crisis situation. So we used that in our application for the National Fund for Sacred Places, because it doesn't make any sense to focus on making ADA compliant bathrooms if we know that that means those bathrooms are going to have water intrusion and efflorescence and plaster crumbling off of the wall, right? We've got to deal with the external water that's coming in, then deal with repairing what's been damaged by water. Then we now have a very safe protective shell for everything that's inside the building. So maybe that question about eras is what are the preceding conversations we had to get to this point. Now this second part, referencing the discernment process described in the last 2 paragraphs of the Future of the Church on St. Charles Avenue, I have sent this question to the folks who put together the feasibility study, because I want to be clear about their intention. What did they mean in writing? I will tell you how I read that last part of the feasibility study. I'm glad to make that available to anybody who wants to have it. It's by request only, because we don't want to just have all of this information floating around. But I pulled up those last 2 paragraphs, and it reads to me as the people who did the conversations, the interviews with our congregation around the building itself, our relationship to the building, and the capital campaign, led the writers of this feasibility to sense we are still not all on the same page when it comes to long-term use and future of the building. And I sometimes wonder if that's part of why I get comments like, some people are confused and people are not sure what's happening. I wonder if it is sometimes I say things that reflect a specific sliver of perspective around the future of this building that people don't like to hear. And so that's why there's confusion. There has been no formal discernment process about selling or giving away the building. That has not happened. There have been lots and lots of candid and casual conversations where those things came up, but at no point has it ever gotten to even be brought to a vote, much less be considered a proper discernment. I would also recommend that you go back and look at some of the other videos that I've posted after the blip, the sermon that I preached in March, and then probably the video that I did about the St. Charles Center for Faith in Action. I'll have to edit this one. Those get at my personal hunch that having the center very closely aligned with the church, being legally tethered as sole member, opens up some possibilities in the future for the center to possibly maintain this building if the church decides to relinquish that. If we came to that point, we would also have a lot of things in writing about the church, gets to be here in perpetuity. But the candid truth of it is we have about 75 active members in this congregation, and the building is 45,000 square feet. We could all move in here. It might be a little tight, but we would have our own space. We don't need all this space for us. And that's why we brought in community partners to begin with. We have more space than we need. We've been doing that for a long time, more than 20 years. It's part of why we have launched the St. Charles Center for Faith in Action, is to increase ways of engagement, means of engagement on this campus that are for the common good, that come out of that rooted, sacred center. So to my mind, the future of this physical structure is very closely linked with the quantity of people we can continue to share space with. I believe the future of this faith community is closely linked to the community partners and neighborhood organizations that use this physical campus. And my prediction is that external use of the building will only grow in the years to come. And lastly, one of the things I've said pretty consistently for a while now is that preserving this building just for us would be preserving a museum to 20th century American Protestant Christianity. And I'm not interested in being a museum curator. I don't feel called to that. I don't think that that's what we as a people are called to. This is a congregation that has shared its space very intentionally for a long, long time, almost its entire history that we know of. So it's really returning to that original purpose. If we are committed together to using this facility as a sacred place that serves the common good in all kinds of ways, that is therapists and pro bono attorneys and performing groups that come in and have plays and music and visual art, if that is yoga and orchestra and all of these different partners that we are so fortunate to call ours, what an amazing use of sacred space. And that is really what the discernment process is about. As we move into this capital campaign, I think the feasibility study writers meant there's a necessary process of discernment that our congregation will need to go through to get on the same page about what exactly we see happening here in 5 and 10 and 20 years. So if your personal vision for the church is that eventually we're going to need all this space again, eventually the congregation will be full with young families and people climbing out the windows because there are not enough seats, and we're going to have to reopen all of that Sunday school space, then you're going to hear something conflicting in what I'm saying, and that will sound really confusing because that's not the vision I imagine for this space. Though I continue to imagine a vibrant and loving and passionate, justice-seeking congregation who is every bit as committed to asking questions, seeking justice, loving neighbors, welcoming all, as they have been since 1898. It just might look a little bit different here in the physical building.